You are a bright light of God's love. You are a bright light of God's love. What if that were true? What if you actually believed that? Not just when you're happy. What if you believed that all the time? What if that were part of the fabric of your being? What if you knew, without question, doubt, or hesitation, that you are the bright light of God's love? That the reason that you are here is because God had need of an instrument here. That each one of us, in some way, is exactly the same. Human beings living on the planet Earth. And yet each one of us is unique and special and different. And what if the reason that you're here is to shine your light in a way that is unique and special and wonderful, and bring something new to the planet that wouldn't exist if you weren't here? What if you actually create your life with your beliefs? What if that actually worked all the time, not just in the stories that we tell after the opening prayer? What if that were going on all the time? What if you didn't just know it up in your head? Think that the theory is really good, that you can quote places in various books or scripture or talks that you've seen on Oprah about how that happens. But it lived in your gut. What if you really believed that every moment, that you're creating your life, that you're creating the next phase of your experience according to your belief? What if it were impossible to fail? What if anything that you're hesitating to embark upon, anything that you're thinking that you might want to do, anything you're feeling like you might want to have happen, you're holding back because you're afraid you're going to fail? What if you couldn't fail? If you knew those things at all times, would you act differently? Would you do something differently? Would you approach your life differently if you actually believed that every moment along the way? You are the bright light of God's infinite love right here, right now, and always. I am not making that up. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm reminding you of something. We do create our lives according to our beliefs. Sometimes we create something very specific and something very powerful. And other times we create something that's kind of wishy-washy and kind of wondering, maybe if I'm going to hesitate, I'm going to make sure that I have insurance, I'm going to do all of those things to protect myself in case it doesn't work. And those are all really good things to do. Because there are times when we forget. There are times when we forget that we're the bright light of God's love. Demonstration. When somebody shows up for the second time, we give them one of these little flashlights, a keyring flashlight, which we lovingly call the bright light of God's love. And the cool thing, one for the camera, the wonderful thing about these little lights, I need one right now, because this is a very brightly lit room. It helps you to be able to see in the dark. In the middle of the night, with none of the other lights on, this little light will light up the room, which is kind of cool. It lets us see in the dark. It's not really dark, it's otherwise dark. As soon as we turn the light on, it's not dark anymore. So with this little light, we can light up the room. Now, if we were in a darkened stadium, we could have this little light. You'd be able to see it from the other side of the stadium, but it wouldn't light up the whole stadium. But we have ways. We have brighter lights. We have bigger lights. We have lights that shine more brightly that can light up a stadium. I've been in a stadium at night, and you can see everything. This little light, I'm going to let it shine. Need a bigger light? I'll let that shine. Now, what about a light that's bright enough to light up the moon? We see the moon at night, and the moon is actually lit by the sun, and we can see it nice and clearly because it's reflecting, and we're otherwise in darkness. We can see the moon. Now, the part of the moon that's not lit up, I could stand there and shine this little light up onto it. Would that change anything, you think? You suppose you could see this little light from the moon? Do you suppose if I click it on the moon's going to light up for us now? No, that doesn't actually happen. there's a couple of things that keep that from happening. Because even though the light is really, really bright, especially in a dark room or when it's really close to you, it's only got so much power. It's only got so much illumination ability. Do you suppose it's possible to shine a light on the moon and be able to see it? Yeah, we've actually been doing that since 1961, and it got really much easier in 1969 with the first moon landing when they put a reflector up that reflects the light back. I have to use a very special kind of light, okay, which is a laser. I have one with me. Back in the 1960s, they were very dangerous. They were in James Bond movies, and they were used to threaten people's lives. Now we use them for show and tell. On slide number 17, you can see that I'm doing this, that. Now, it looks like a little beam of light, but a laser works differently than a light. You don't take a light and then make the light inside of it. You don't focus it to make that happen. What happens with a laser is that the light is coherent. All of the photons that are coming out of this little light are kind of random, and they're going in a bunch of directions, and we can use reflectors and lenses to get them to go in the direction that we want. In a laser, all of the photons are in phase. All of the photons are at the same frequency, and all of the photons are coherent. They're heading in the same direction. Laser time. Here we go. You can buy these at Staples now. I actually had one that was given to me as a promotional gift. They used to be thousands of dollars. So look at the gift that we all have, that this little light can be mine. But the part that I want to talk about isn't the laser pointer. It's a cute little toy. It's a lot of fun, especially if you have a cat. They just love to chase the little dot around the floor. But the idea of bringing a laser here is to talk about the coherency. In the same way that we can take a laser and shine it to the moon, 250,000 miles away, and have that light shine back at us and be able to see it from the moon. By taking that coherency and being able to use that, and we're actually using it for measurements, we can measure how far away the moon is as it shifts, just by timing the light. But it's the ability to shine that light in a very coherent, very specific way that lets us accomplish something new. So what's the lesson for our lives? When we're sitting here having wonderful, bright light thoughts, oh, I'm a child of God, everything is bubbling and wonderful. It's great. We're letting our light shine. And if you're doing that, don't stop doing that. It's simply an invitation to take your thoughts and make them even more coherent. Get the thoughts and have them be in phase with each other. One of the most challenging things that we do is we have a great idea of something that we want to bring into our lives, and then we go, I'm not sure that's going to work. And we start second guessing ourselves. Now, there's a very important part that process has in our creativity as we fine-tune the idea down to what action steps we're actually going to take. But in the creative, intentional process, when we undermine ourselves by saying, I could do this, or no, I could do that, but maybe, those are the times when we're not letting our light be coherent. We're not letting our light be focused. We're not letting our light shine the way that we want it to. So when we're having coherent thoughts, first of all, they're very intentional. And not every thought that we have is going to be one of those coherent thoughts that's going to shine to the moon, that's going to bring something new into our lives. And that's actually really good news. Because if you have a thought that's for something that you don't want to bring into your life, if you have a thought that would qualify as, worry, then you really don't want what you think about, what you're worried about, what you're buying insurance to cover you for is going to happen. So we need to have a little bit of space where not every thought is going to have that power and that impact. And even if you think that you're very sophisticated, I invite you not to think of a snowstorm right now. Do not, under any circumstances, think of a blizzard with the snow piling up 3 feet tall. Do not think about the roads being closed or there being ice. Is there anybody who didn't get a picture of that? No, because we all let our minds go in that direction, even if you don't want to have a blizzard. I'm really enjoying May. I don't need to have a blizzard now. It's something that exists out there. I don't need to draw it to myself now. So I can have that thought without having it be one of those intentional, coherent thoughts. But when you get that nudge, when we get that idea, oh, there's something that I want to create, that's the time when we can allow the focus, where we can allow the coherence, where we can allow that precision to come into our words. What we want to do is we want to be intentional. We say, this is a thought that I like, this is a path that I want to be walking down, this is something I want to be inviting in my life. Be very specific and intentional. This is what I am creating. And at that point, be focused. Don't be thinking about other stuff. Don't be thinking about, I can be the star on the soccer team, and maybe I also want to be on the lacrosse team, and maybe I also want to have a girlfriend, and maybe I want to do this, and maybe I want to do that, and wonder what the movie's going to be this evening. Be focused. Be specific on whatever it is that you're creating and bringing into your life. Be positive. Don't not never know, say what you don't want when you can say what you do want. Negatives are really important. Negatives give us the opportunity to identify what's happening that we want to move away from. Those are the shadows. Those are the dark areas where you can say, I'm seeing shadow and darkness here, and I want to choose something different. But once we get intentional, once we start thinking about what we really want to be creating and bringing into our lives, be positive. You guys all know what the most positive statement in the world is, most powerful affirmation. I am. And whatever you put after I am, or I will, or I do, is the most powerful statement that you can make. If you're looking to create prosperity in your life, I am prosperous. I have plenty. I live in abundance. Very short, very positive statements. And if you find yourself saying, I am prosperous except for the bank account, or I am rich and wealthy but not as wealthy as those other people, listen to your mind. Listen to the stuff that's going on in your head and focus on the positive. And the fourth thing to do is to be persistent. It's great to do that once. Get up early in the morning, you sit on the purple meditation pillow, and something wonderful comes to your mind. Oh, I'm going to create something wonderful in my life. And then you go have breakfast, and you start complaining to somebody else over a cup of coffee, and then suddenly you're griping about work, and then there's that, and all the rest of it. You had this magical power that you were using first thing in the morning. Be persistent. Remind yourself on a regular basis that that is the truth of who you are. That's the truth of your experience. This is not wishful thinking. If you have that idea and you hold it up there and you say, I'd love to get there sometime. And then let the voices say, but I don't have it now, but it's really going to be a long way, it's going to have it, and all the rest of those things, then what you're reminding yourself is that you don't have it now. When you decide there's something that you're bringing into your life and you can be very clear and very positive and very intentional about it, then you be inviting. Be persistent. Keep that thought in your mind. You don't have to focus on it. It's not using willpower. It's just refusing to let your mind turn to negative thoughts, turn in opposite directions. And sometimes stuff, that's a euphemism for another word, stuff happens that we don't like. Stuff comes up and it just doesn't seem to fit at all with what it is that we want to be having in our experience. There's two things that I invite you to do in a situation like that. Is there anybody here who's ever had an experience where something happened that they didn't really like? Anybody? Yeah, okay.
Today?
Yeah, there you go. So the first thing you do is ask yourself a question. Okay, if this turns out to be a blessing, if this experience that I'm having now, which is so crummy, which is so demoralizing, which is so negative, if this turns out to be a blessing in my life, how might that look? So on the one hand, you say, that's Pollyanna. And if you think about it, what's really wrong with Pollyanna? But it's the other thing that happens. What if this actually turns out to be a blessing? What you're doing is you're opening yourself up to a bigger possibility. It's bad right now because you're in the middle of it. We've all watched movies, we've all watched plays, we've all watched television shows, and there is a dramatic structure that is so ingrained in the entertainment media that it's sort of like an unwritten rule. It's the 3-act play, or the 3-act production. In Act 1, you set up the characters, you introduce everybody, you get people to know each other, there's this happy, bubbly optimism. In Act 2, now that you've done all that exposition and we know who the characters are and we know what the situation is, that's when the evil, vicious Darth Vader Nazi types show up who are going to decimate and undermine not only the idea that we had in mind, but threaten to destroy whoever the star of the program or the protagonist in the story is going to be. And then in the 3rd act, we come to resolution, which is celebrated VE Day, the anniversary of when the Nazis were defeated. Well, that was pretty good 3rd act in that particular program. It was important. And the 3rd act couldn't happen without the 2nd act. So once you get into one of these situations where the things that seem to be going along the way that you wanted to are all going wrong, and it's all turning bad, and you're asking yourself that question, if this turns out to be a blessing, how might that look? How might it be clear that this is a blessing? When you get to that point, you're in the 2nd act. You are in Act 2 of whatever program you're in. And I'm telling you that from my head. You could be in Act 2, like a professor. Drop to my heart, drop to my gut. Act 2 sucks. Act 2 is the time where people feel lowest, where we feel depleted, where we feel the challenges. That's where people turn to substance abuse, that's where people turn to suicide, that's where people do desperate things. I'm not going to say it's just Act 2, because it's all real. It all is so powerful and so real. And it happens to all of us. And it's Act 2. And when we're in the middle of Act 2, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. In 1992, I was living in South Florida. I'd been married for 5 years, had a baby on the way, bought a house. 4-bedroom ranch house on a canal. It was the first house that I'd ever owned. That was in April. My daughter was also born in April. In August, Hurricane Andrew is heading towards the house. Now, when you're looking at the TV weather radar, and this is Florida, and there's this huge hurricane, and it's heading right in our direction, that's panic time. This was a very uncomfortable Act 2. In the 36 hours leading up to the storm, we had no idea where it was going to hit. We just knew it was going to be big. So I had friends who lived closer to the beach. They were going to come stay in our house. I knew that I needed to board up the windows because I lived in Florida, and that's what you did. A little panicky, I was down at the Home Depot trying to buy plywood, and they had a line going all the way through the parking lot. And I'm standing there, and it's Sunday morning, and I'm waiting in line to get into the Home Depot so that I can go and spend the rest of the day boarding up my house so that Sunday night when the hurricane comes in, the house doesn't get the roof blown off and we wind up in Kansas or wherever you go from South Florida. And standing there in the line, it's like 3 hours I'm in line. Like, okay, what if they run out of plywood? What if I can't do this? What if blah, 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 blah. And all of those things are going through my head. I was in the middle of Act 2. I get inside the Home Depot, all the plywood's gone. The only plywood they had was marine grade plywood, which was $45 a sheet. I would have needed another mortgage just to buy the plywood. So then I'm panicking. What do I do? All of these things are coming into my... There was so much evidence that there was a calamity in the making. So I bought some furring strips and some pegboard, because that's what they had. Because what you really need to do is just make sure that nothing can blow through the windows. And I spent the day cutting furring strips, cutting pegboard, putting pegboard up over my house. The sun went down, I stood outside looking. I had now created the world's largest light bright. I'd always wanted to be a homeowner And here I have a light bright in the path of a hurricane. This was the second act. And I had my daughter was months old. There's no place, we were living in Fort Lauderdale, there's no place to run. So all we could do was sit there and watch the TV and watch the storm get closer and closer and closer, and it was looking like it was going to hit us square on. At the last minute, it curved a little bit to the south, and it hit Homestead, which was about 40 miles south of our homestead in Plantation, outside of Fort Lauderdale. And afterwards I went down, and there were houses, same construction, same floor plan, same layout as my house, that were completely demolished. The third act on that was that my house was spared. I did more damage to my house by putting up the light bright than the storm did. But I didn't know that at the time. In Act 2, I was doing the best that I could every step along the way. But that's the reminder. When you're in an Act 2, remember that you're in Act 2. This is the second act, and there is something coming afterwards. And that's where you get to be intentional about shining your light. Because remember, you are the bright light of God's love. And the other thing that we mentioned earlier is that the light is much brighter, much easier to see when it's dark. So when you get into Act 2 and it's looking dark, remember who you are. Remember that you are the bright light of God's love. And not only can things get better, but there's a way to make things better. It's those 4 statements that we had. You be intentional about your thoughts, about what you're creating. You can do it because it's something that you're yearning for. You can do it because it's something where everything else has gone completely to hell. What's happening in my life? How am I going to bring something better into it? And there's a wonderful little technique that we came up with inadvertently during our Beyond Limits class. When we're looking for things to get better, when we're looking for a change to happen in our lives, when you say, this is awful and it's horrible and I'm just going to turn my attention, it's fine. It's wonderful. Everything is okay. Our disbelief kicks in. So the invitation today is, when you're having a situation like that, and it doesn't have to be something awful, it could be something that's okay, where you want it to be a little bit better, where you want something to be more, just set your intention and your beliefs for 10% better. I don't want this to be perfect. I don't want this to be done. I just want it to be 10% better now than it was yesterday. I want it to be 10% better tomorrow than it was today. And there's something wonderful about the idea of 10%. Because I might not be able to believe that I can have everything, but I can sure believe that it gets 10% better. In the human resources world, there are really good reasons why people don't get raises more than 10%. But a 10% raise is right at the edge of, a manager can give somebody a 10% raise and it gives them enough of a boost without putting them into a new category of something that they can't handle. Tithing, where we're giving of our time and our talent and our treasure, the guideline is to use 10%. When we're putting together seed money, or when we are collecting up seeds from the harvest, we set aside 10%. Because it turns out that you can take 10% out of what you've got going on. It's really not going to affect the lifestyle and the process and the program that much. 10% you can handle, whether it's something that you're giving or something that you're getting. So put that to use. If you can't believe that this is all going to be better tomorrow, then set your intention. Allow it to be 10% better tomorrow. And then tomorrow, open yourself up to another decision, another choice, another opportunity, and have it get 10% better, and then 10% better. This is a process that works. It works for everybody, not because I said it works, not because you know the secret magic word. This is the nature of the universe. The truth is, please, please remember this. You are the bright light of God's love, shining brightly. And I love you, and I'm grateful for you. 10% more than I ever thought possible.